Hello everyone! Thank you for joining us for another 10 Thoughts cruising video. This time we've got a very unique place, the remote exotic archipelago known as Chagos. This one is pretty interesting, and we're going to start off with kind of the history of the area because it's not something we've really talked about before, but it is quite interesting, I think.
And controversial.
Yeah, that too. So I'm going to jump right on in and talk about, first of all, it began as kind of coconut plantations back in the 1700s, first with the French and then the British. In about 1840, the slaves who were working those plantations were freed, and then they decided to stay and colonize the islands. In 1903, the archipelago was formally attached to Mauritius. Not a great decision for the long run, unfortunately, and because in 1965, the UK bought the archipelago from Mauritius, and then the UK promptly signed an agreement with the US to rent out the islands for a military base. When they made that agreement, they didn't want the Chagosians living on the islands, so they rehomed all of them. There are no Chagosians living on the islands anymore. They were rehomed either to the Seychelles or mostly to Mauritius. And then once the islanders were gone, the naval base at Diego Garcia was built.
Yep.
And that's about the only permanent establishment still in Chagos. So that's not a great history there, and there's actually been a couple rulings recently, both with the International Court of Justice and the UN General Assembly. It's voted that the UK should return Chagos to the Chagosians, but there's no real standing power behind those bodies to enforce those decisions, so
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's not going to happen anytime soon.
And a lot of the issue is that the Chagosians who were basically exiled from their island to Mauritius, like Mauritius got paid by the UK to rehome these people, but they were not really given, their home was taken away from them, and they weren't really given appropriate places to live in either Seychelles or Mauritius. So that's a problem for these people who have lost their country.
Yeah, and it was really kind of hit home when we went and toured that village, when there was just a stone plaque memorial there, kind of saying that, this is to let everyone know that we left behind, that we're still thinking of them. And that hit home quite a bit. So now it is quite a complicated place to go visit. So the formalities are...
Yeah, formalities in Chagos are a little bit more complicated than most places we've been to.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. First of all, you have to apply for a permit, which is done through the British Indian Ocean Territory. That's the governing body over Chagos. We applied for the permit on January 26th. That's when we first sent in our initial paperwork, and we received our permit on April 30th.
Note, that's a long time between the two. So do not do this like 2 days before you're leaving. It ain't going to happen in time.
It's recommended that you apply at least 6 weeks before your intended arrival into Chagos. But our application permit took longer than that, and usually it was... I emailed them the stuff they asked for, and maybe a week or two later, I hadn't heard back and had to email them again. So even though they were very nice, it was a long process. The cost for the permit is 75 British pounds a week, which is about 94 US dollars, and you can stay up to 4 weeks. So you're looking at about $400 to stay the full 4 weeks in Chagos. We only stayed 2 weeks, but we definitely wish we'd stayed longer.
Yeah, it would have been nice to stay longer, but... This is one of the few times we had kind of a sailing to a schedule situation, so we had to go. We
had a memorial service to fly back for, so... and then when you get to the islands, you are required to update the authorities... When you are departing to arrive in Chagos, you can change the start date on your permit, so you need to email the authorities in advance and let them know your date. So once you give them the date in the initial permit, it's not set in stone. You can change the date that you're actually going to arrive into Chagos, which is good.
Yeah, very generous of them to let you change that pretty close to your departure date.
Now, with the permit process, there are insurance requirements, and that is because Chagos is such a remote location, and they do not want the military base to have to take on responsibility for the cruisers that are coming to visit. For example, there are two main things that we had to deal with for our insurance. The first is that Chagos requires that you have medvac insurance with a minimum $100,000 per person coverage.
That's quite a lot for most insurance policies.
Our regular insurance that we use, our expat insurance, has about a $25,000 medvac policy, so that did not cover it. We had to apply for an additional rider through our insurance broker in order to cover the requirements, and we ended up getting, I think it was like $1 million coverage, just because that's what they do. The second insurance requirement that we had to meet was wreck recovery, cleanup, and removal.
And if you've watched our video or Delos', you maybe have figured out why.
Yeah.
Because they don't want those wrecks to be left on the beach anymore.
Yep. Thankfully, our vessel insurance through Jackline, did meet the wreck recovery, cleanup, and removal requirements. Now, when you're emailing with the buyout people, you do have to highlight in the insurance documents and point out exactly where your insurance meets the requirements to help them out and figure that out.
Yeah, so I know this is all a little bit technical and kind of like we're talking on and on about this, but this was very unusual for most of the places we visited. Like, this was a lot of work and detail to try to get all this straight.
And through talking with other cruisers, we know that a lot of cruisers don't carry vessel insurance or don't carry health insurance, which is a problem on its own. And we also know that buyout will deny you application for health or medical reasons. For example, if you're an older cruiser, they will not. We know a cruiser who's in their 70s, and buyout would not allow them to come because it's a medical concern.
Yeah.
And then when we arrived to Chagos, we had to check in. We gave them notice via email. And actually, we didn't know this, but they do send people around to clear you in, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, like, customs and quarantine house to go visit or anything like that, so it was a little strange.
It was basically like a random patrol. We were, as you've seen from our previous video, we were out on our walk, and the boat came in. There was this big military ship just outside the atoll, and a little tender was coming in and stopping at all the boats. So we hustled back to the boat so that we could meet the crew there. The permits were checked. Our passports were stamped with a super cool special buyout stamp, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, and it was an interesting mix between there were Brits who were the ones who officially were doing all the clearances because it's, officially the British territories, but there were U.S. military personnel on that tender as well. So we got along with everyone, and we're chatting, and how they like the posting in Chagos and stuff. And it doesn't sound like the nightlife's great, but the local surroundings and the view is pretty good. So
I mean, they basically said like this is one of the better postings for the military personnel, and they actually, once they left our boat, they were like, oh yeah, we're going out diving this wreck over there. That's really cool. So,
which we're going to touch on a little bit later, because that was slightly annoying for us. But yeah.
But it was pretty neat to talk to them, and we thought they were very friendly with the check-in process. They did thoroughly inspect our boat as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was a long time talking about formalities, but that's because there were a lot to adhere to. So it was a lot, but it was well worth it. I think, especially because next category time, Chagos is like a marine protected reserve, and it is just absolutely amazing when you think about how big this place is. So it is 640,000 square kilometers, which for reference is larger than France or the state of California. Yeah. That's huge. So it's got 1% of the entire world's coral in it, and it was declared, I think, a marine protected area in 2010, if I'm remembering right. Yeah. So it's a very unique, well-preserved marine environment. Like, you've got the coral was actually pretty damn good.
The coral, the fish.
The fish were good. The red-footed boobies was pretty impressive. Like, they had no reason to be scared because there was no real predators or humans intervention much with them. So we got a chance to see all those boobies hanging out in the tree, which... still my favorite bird, I have to say, I think. But, yeah.
Such a juvenile sense of humor.
I know, I can't help it. But so just kind of the marine protection and the environment there was a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, it was. There are 2 areas that you can anchor in the Chagos archipelago. One is the Solomon's Atoll, which is where we anchored. There's an anchorage. I'm going to totally butcher the names of these islands. They are French names.
As we usually do.
So y'all can correct me if you need to, Il Fouquet and Il Bodam. Il Bodam is where the abandoned village was, and Il Fouquet is where we anchored. The second atoll is Paros Banos? Banos? I don't know. We didn't go there. The nice thing about Il Fouquet, where we anchored, was that it's the best protection from the predominantly easterly winds. There's a nice sandy shelf between Takamaka Island and Phuket Island that was about 3 meters deep, and then it just absolutely drops off. And if you look at the drone footage in our video previously, you can see that it's just really freaking gorgeous sandbar there.
Yeah. Now, you do have to be very careful because Amy mentioned the wind is predominantly easterlies, but when those squalls blow through, wind shifts like that. And, I mean, that's why that catamaran ended up on the beach. The squall blew through, and it just, they weren't set and ready for it. So you have to be ready for, you can have some very unprotected spots, with an island suddenly behind you when it wasn't, 2 minutes previously. Now, I will say the navionics charts here were better than I were expecting. It was still really good to have the satellite images, especially as we were coming into the entrance. The navionics charts didn't have a whole lot of detail on that, but I was surprised by the detail on the charts. I think probably because this is a military area, and so they've done a pretty good job of charting it, I think. But, yeah, so it was still good to keep an eye on the bow, shall we say.
Yeah.
Now, there are a couple of different options for where you can go after you leave Chagos, and this was a great discussion amongst most of the cruisers who were there, because you can generally go east to the Seychelles,
west
which is
to the Seychelles.
Oh yeah, it is west. I gotta keep that in mind. West to the Seychelles, which is where we ended up going, or you can try to go south down towards Mauritius and Reunion. Now, going down south is a challenge because you're generally heading pretty high, pointing sailing upwind. The winds can be very challenging and very high going down that way as well. So if you want to go south, you have to be ready to leave before you want to, I think. We know one boat that was kind of there around the general time we did that made it south, and that was our friends on Slow Flight, and they left way earlier than they wanted to because there was a window. The other boats that stayed didn't make it south because another window never opened.
Yeah, and their permit was running out.
Their permit actually ran out. They got additional extensions from the
very kindly
Biot,
from the Biot people.
Yes, because the weather was no good.
Yeah.
But eventually they were like, you have to get out. And so the only way they could go was to the Seychelles. And so they never did make it south. So that's something to be thinking about if you want to go south, is you have to probably take advantage of a weather window, even if it's a bit earlier than you'd like.
Yeah, yeah. Trash. There are no facilities in Chagos, so you need to be prepared to take your trash with you. And thanks to general ocean pollution, even though we're in this beautiful remote place in the middle of the Indian Ocean, there was trash on the beach. So try to do a bit of beach cleanup when you come through.
Yeah. I have seen and read about cruisers trying to burn trash in old barrels and stuff like that. I mean, you're not supposed to do that while you're in Chagos, so we just tried to minimize as much trash before we left the Maldives as we could.
Yep.
So we got rid of all the plastic from our food that we brought on board, all those sort of things, so we could minimize what we had while we were there, and we just took everything out.
Yeah,
with us.
I mean, our visit, we had the 2 weeks in Chagos, a couple days to get to Chagos, and then a week to get to Seychelles. So that's not like an insanely long time to manage trash.
If you do spend your full 4 weeks in Chagos, though, then, it can add up. So it just pays to think before you get there to minimize trash while you're there.
Yep.
Now, we're going to talk about snorkeling and diving, and I made a little bit of a snide comment earlier because there's no diving allowed for cruisers, even though the military personnel were fully allowed to go diving, which kind of is a bummer for us because, we have all the dive gear on the boat. This is like why we got the dive gear, because it's supposed to be absolutely amazing, but not allowed to do so, which, in all fairness, Diego Garcia is like a couple 100 miles away from these atolls where we anchored. So it's not like if you come up with the bends, you're going to be able to get somewhere easily for treatment. So again, they're being uber cautious.
Yeah, I think primarily it's a medical issue. They don't want to be responsible for taking care of cruisers who have dive accidents, which is a really serious issue.
Yeah, for sure. Fortunately, though, the snorkeling is pretty damn good. The coral was quite healthy. We didn't do much filming. Actually, the film we got just didn't turn out great at all. But the coral, we did do snorkeling a little bit, and it was good. So that was quite nice. And we did see a lot of wildlife. So we had some manta rays that were swimming around the anchorage with us. We saw one jumping out of the water, which is always awesome.
Belly flop into the water.
I mean, they're not the most graceful of things ever, but
how dare you?
Out of the water.
Yeah.
Out of the water, not graceful. No. And there were lots of sharks hanging around too, but...
Oh, we saw sharks every day from the boat. It was pretty impressive.
And we turned on the underwater lights and had a bunch of fish that were coming up and swimming in those. So, yeah, the snorkeling was good. The wildlife was good. And I'm sure the diving would have been phenomenal if we could have gone.
It's okay. Now, if you can't dive and snorkel, what do you do in Chagos? There is the Black Rose shipwreck, which you've seen in our video. And there's also the abandoned village. We didn't spend a whole lot of time in the abandoned village because the mosquitoes were terrible. So if you're going to go, bring bug spray.
Oh, yeah. Lots of it.
Try to snorkel as much as you can. And we did several beach walks on different islands, which was really nice.
And I thought, for me, that was really like a huge highlight. I mean, we don't normally just go out and walk on the beach just because we're so surrounded by beaches. But there it was really impressive. Just there's nothing there, so it's literally just you and nature completely, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And then of course walking to see the booby colonies and other wildlife. Like we saw amazing eels and fish and just
crabs everywhere,
lots of stuff during our walks, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I do want to say that there are more than just one shipwreck there. So the Black Rose is the one that's on the beach, but there are actually quite a few shipwrecks within the inner lagoon, if you will, and several of them are within snorkeling distance. So if you can free dive at least halfway decently, you can get down and see them. So there's quite a bit to do. In addition, I'm going to kind of jump on into the provisioning segment because this is also something that cruisers were doing a lot, which is you can go fishing, line fishing for yourself while you're there. And because there's no fishing industry or anything, cruisers were actually pretty successful at catching fish. Were we? No.
We didn't
of
try,
course not.
guys.
We didn't try, but other cruisers who were out there, they literally would go out every day and go trolling for fish and caught some pretty big ones. So that was kind of another big popular thing to do in Chagos.
I think some of the cruisers that were waiting for a weather window were really bored. Our friend Jackie went out fishing every day, which, good for him.
Yeah, that's true. Now, other than fishing for yourself, there's no real provisions here in Chagos. So you really have to be prepared when you leave the Maldives or wherever you leave from before you get to Chagos that you're not going to find anything other than fish and coconuts. There's a lot of coconuts there, but
yeah, we were fortunate that we really supplied our boat in Ghan, and when we got to Chagos, several of our friends had already been there for weeks, and we knew that we were going to be leaving the boat soon, so we had some extra food that we could give them, which was nice on our part. Go us,
And that is true.
Cruising karma.
Boats that left from places who were going to Chagos, who knew boats who were already in Chagos, were doing some additional asking of hey, do you need something for me to pick up? And if I can get something, try. So again, kind of that cruiser mentality, spirit, everyone's sticking together, trying to help out. That was really cool. Yeah. I like that part of it a lot. So now, last segment, internet access. None. Period. End of sentence.
Your usual offshore communications.
Yeah. Not going to find a SIM card store, no cell phone towers. You're just going to be off the grid for a while.
Yeah, but that's one of the great parts about Chagos.
Yeah. It was nice to be disconnected for a little while. Just enjoy the beauty of the exotic paradise we were in. So that was quite nice.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching our videos, and we hope that someday you get to go out and explore Chagos yourself.
Yeah, and if you have any questions or anything about Chagos, definitely leave a comment down below. We will do our best to answer them with what we've learned, what we think, and we'll keep on doing these videos. And we're headed to the Seychelles next.
But first, we run out of fuel.
Yeah, that's kind of bad. Thanks for watching, guys.